wonder which part you think of, but whichever part, it's busy, isn't it? It's a busy place, and it's a place that's full of life. It's almost airport vibes with people meeting and going on important trips. I know it's busy because I stayed there overnight once for a charity thing, like an awareness thing about homelessness and poverty, and so slept there, and it was busy the whole night. Scary in some ways. But it's a place that's just on, and it's kind of like a hub of Sydney, and you've got, like a HSC student on the way to the exam in their private school clothes. You've got a construction worker going, I don't know, North Sydney or somewhere to build something like clay. You've got, I don't know, tourists going to Blue Mountains, people going to Bondi, it's just all, there's food, it's just a place of life. But it didn't used to be like that because it used to be something else. Did you know this? It used to be a cemetery. There was there in 1820 it started the Devonshire Street Cemetery, which I guess was kind of probably toward the edge of the city at that point, 1820. And so it was a place of about dead bodies and mourning, and a kind of quiet place, and not a place where you go places, but you go to stop, in that sense. But then in 1901, the state government decided we're going to do a new thing. We're going to change what happens here. And just this morning, as I said this the first time to the 8 a.m. congregation, I thought, I wonder who the first person to hear about it was and what their reaction was. Maybe, the news comes from the officers, the state officers, to a gardener or a grave digger. We're doing a new thing here. And I wonder what the grave, digger thought. A new grove or a new type of shrub or something. But no, a new thing, a different thing. And can you imagine all the work that would have to happen? Lots of work. Like, I say lots of work, but I know how much work. 30,000 sets of remains had to be exhumed and put on a new train track that they built for the purpose and taken away somewhere else. Because we didn't want dead stuff there, we want life, the centre of Sydney. And I believe they took a large proportion of the 30,000 remains to Waverley Cemetery, and it really started to grow from that point. We're doing a new work there, different. I'm guessing the grave diggers and gardeners probably couldn't quite imagine at that point when they first said it. And in this series that we're looking at, John 15, this is what John's Gospel says. God is doing a new work. He's doing a different thing. And you might be here as someone who doesn't yet know Jesus very much or follow Jesus, and you might think, oh, that's a kind of strange not be able to get it, like maybe the grave digger, or maybe you're a Christian person, and I want to suggest that you and I don't quite get it yet. And we might have been following Jesus for a long time, but I still think we need to learn the depth of what John's Gospel is saying, that God is doing a new thing. And I just want you to think about the state of humanity. Maybe your life here in Bondi is pretty good at the moment. It's a beautiful place, isn't it? Lots of life. But our humanity, our family, our race is not in a good way. And the seasons of good seem to only last for little fits and starts for a few years here or there. And suffering comes, doesn't it? And I want you to hear tonight, the Bible says God is doing a new thing that's different to that. But maybe you don't need to kind of look out to the news and think about humanity generally. Maybe you need a new thing. Maybe there's challenges in your health at the moment. Maybe there have been challenges in your health for a long time. Maybe there's challenges in relationships or at work, or just how you go about things is you're finding it challenging. And the Bible said God's doing a new thing and can bring surprising changes that you wouldn't believe. A completely different category to what's happening at the moment. I want to show you what we're doing tonight is kind of stepping back from John 15 before we dive in and looking at John's Gospel. John was one of the people that Jesus had called to follow him. And what he writes in John's Gospel is mainly made up of the speeches of Jesus, things that John heard Jesus say, and things that John saw Jesus do. But before he dives right into kind of reporting what he heard, what he saw, he introduces what he's going to talk about in what's called John's prologue, John chapter 1. And Martin spoke to us about it. I was sitting in my bed with the flu last week, listening on Zoom, feeling sad that I couldn't be with all my friends and eat dinner with you. But I heard Martin's talk, and he touched on the prologue as well. Do you remember? In the beginning was the Word. That's the start of the prologue. Yeah, keep that there for me. Thanks, James. And John's prologue is this like lofty, profound, philosophically laden bit of prose before we get into something that's a bit more like, here's the speech that Jesus said and here's what he did next. But first we've got the prose, the philosophical prose. And I've got the first 4 lines of it there, 5 lines of it there for you. John chapter 1. And here's my contention. John is like my little boy Herbie when Herbie's found a YouTube video that he really wants to show me. Like, come and look at this, come and look at this. John, in the way that he writes here, is saying, come and look at this. I want to tell you something really special. How's it come and look at this? Because it's mirroring Genesis chapter 1. And Genesis chapter 1 is an important chapter in the Bible. Genesis chapter 1 is the first chapter. First things in the series are always important because they set things up. Genesis chapter 1 speaks of how God created, that he brought life, and that he's behind all things. And it's an origin story about you and me and the world and reality, origin story. And John chapter 1 mirrors it and says he's doing a new thing. As important, as powerful. So let me show you how he's mirroring. John chapter 1 is mirroring Genesis chapter 1. Genesis chapter 1 says, in the beginning, God created. John chapter 1, same words, mirrors. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. Martin helpfully introduced to us last week that name for Jesus, the Word, the Logos, the operating principle of the world is what it meant in Greek philosophy. And as I say, both start with in the beginning. Secondly, in Genesis chapter 1, it says, God created the heavens and the earth. And again, it's mirrored here in John chapter 1, verse 3. Through him were all things were made. Genesis chapter 1 says, darkness covered the face of the deep, and God said, let there be light. John chapter 1 talks about the dark and the light as well. The light has shone into the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome. Genesis chapter 1, verse 3 says that it is by God's word speaking that he creates. God said, let there be light. And John chapter 1 says, through this personal word, Jesus, all things have been created. John chapter 1 is saying, little boy with the YouTube video saying, you need to see there's something really special. Now, Herbie's upstairs right now. Most of the time, it's actually not that important to see what was on YouTube. It's often pretty funny, but have you seen the one? This is corn. Pretty funny. But this is a different level. This is God is speaking and saying, I'm doing a new thing. I'm going to do a new, different thing now. I'm going to create. It's going to be his biggest creation, but a new one. And I want you to hear that on the biggest scale possible. Reality and how things, the whole reality works. And I want you to hear it on your scale. He is going to do a new work in us. But then it carries over into John chapter 2. I want to show you there as well. We just heard that story read by Bruce. Thank you. The wedding in Cana. And I had a few friends over, not for a wedding. Just on Friday night, I had, I don't know, maybe 15 or 20 of us there. And I made lots of pasta. But a few people turned up that hadn't told me they were coming. I literally ran out of pasta. And there's someone here tonight who graciously accepted, I think, 4 threads of pasta and a few prawns. And that was it. And then I made toast for me. We still had lots of fun, and it was embarrassing. I felt embarrassed, a little bit embarrassed. That's Australia in 2022. But back then, in Jesus' day, it was very embarrassing to run out of anything. And Jesus is invited to a party, not just any party, a wedding party. So it's Uber hospitality time. And did you notice his mum was invited? So she's there too. It's a funny thing when your mum's invited to the same party as you. Sometimes it's good. But Jesus and his mum are at the same party, and his friends are there too, his 12 followers. And they run out of wine. It's an embarrassing moment. It's a shameful moment back then. Just embarrassing for me, shameful back then. And Jesus' mum says, come on, you can do something, Jesus. And mark what he says. Not my time. My hour has not yet come. And as you read John, remember Martin said you should be reading John in the next week or two just to get across it. You'll notice that Jesus says this regularly. It's not my time. My hour's not yet come. And then he'll come to a moment and he'll say, now's the time. It's worth just noticing where he does that. But at this point, he says, not my time. His mum ignores him, like most mums, right? And says to the servants, just do what he says. And now I want you to hear John's trying to get your attention and say, new creation. Watch this. He wants you to listen for this theme of recreation, of new work. John recounts that empty jars are taken. There's nothing in them. And then they put a piece of creation in them, water, fill it up with water. And then Jesus turns it into something new. Something that's just going to bring so much joy on that night. Something that surprises people of how good the quality is. Because we thought that the cheapest wine should come out now, but this is good stuff. Jesus is bringing newness then. And John's gospel, and Jesus wants you to know, he has a new work to do. That's what he's doing. A new thing that brings joy and bliss. He's taking what's empty and he's going to fill it up. And not just going to fill it up so it's satisfactory, he's going to fill it up so that people go, oh, this is real good stuff. That's the kind of thing Jesus is doing. And John chapter 2 there, I think it's verse 10 or 11, says that this was the first sign of Jesus' glory that he did. The book seems to be broken into two parts. There's the first half, and there's 7 signs that he does through the first. And it says this is the first one that he did to reveal his glory, to show you who he is. And what you learn about Jesus at his first sign is he introduces himself for the first time, kind of formally by sign, is I'm here to do something real good that brings joy. And to you who looks at the world, but particularly, secondly, to you who has some kind of gap in your life that you feel very keenly like that post we got that night, who has a dryness, who has an emptiness, hear Jesus revealing what he's here to do, to fill up and to bring joy. It's pretty beautiful in its own right, but actually it's even more beautiful if you look at Isaiah chapter 24, which says about Israel and humankind. It says, the vine has dried and withered, and the new wine has dried up, and there's nothing left. And the drinkers are sad, and there's no more playing on instruments. It's Isaiah 24 says, let me tell you about humanity and Israel. Party is over. It's run out. And Jesus comes into that story and brings a new thing. New one. And it's so clear as we look at John's gospel that he's powerful, that he's good. The book seems to be broken in 2 parts. The first part, up to chapter 12, has Jesus revealing himself really loudly to the world. It's just what, like, people are, like, everybody's seeing and responding to this Jesus. Whoa. But then the second half of the book seems to kind of go into just, instead of a couple of years, it goes to just 1 week, and with just his revelation of himself just to his close disciples after that. So it starts with big revelation to the world about who he is, and then the second half of the book goes slower and down to just his close friends revealing who he is. Revelation to the world and revelation to his followers. And it's there in that second half that we come to John chapter 15, which is where we're going to camp for 6 weeks going from now. And Jesus is going to tell you how the newness that he brings, and is powerful, and it's kind of big and bright when you see it in Jesus. How does that come into my life? Not just stay out there and back there in 2,000 years ago, but how does that big revelation of God's power and his new recreation work, how does that sweep me up and come into my life? And particularly in John chapter 15 is where he'll tell you I'm telling you tonight that Jesus has power for recreation. That's what I'm trying to show you from John. And then in John 15, Jesus himself will tell you how he's going to bring it into your life. Like this. I am the vine, the true vine, says Jesus. And my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, so that it will be even more fruitful. You see, he's talking about new creation. He's talking about we're going to go from leaves, and that's all, to fruit. We're going to go from a plant that kind of looks okay, but it's pretty boring after about 3 minutes, to something that you can eat and drink and turn into wine and have parties from. And he says, I'm the true vine, and you're the branches. My Father's the gardener. He's going to cut things off you. Let me read on. You're already pruned because of the word I've spoken to you. The word there is the same word for clean or pruned, so take a pick. Verse 3, you're already pruned because of the word I spoke to you. Remain in me as I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit. No branch can bear newness by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. How is he going to sweep you up? How is this new creation work coming? As you remain in Jesus and he remains in you. Verse 5, I am the vine and you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, will bear much fruit. But apart from me, you can do nothing. So what we're going to be talking about for 6 weeks, that Jesus has things to grow in you that would not grow without his work. You might be naturally equipped, I'd say by his common grace, just working to hold you together. But you might naturally do things on your own, but he's got other better things to do in your life that you will not do without his careful, not even careful and close work, intimately connected with him work. Stay in me and I stay in you, it says. And so that's what we're going to be looking at for 6 weeks. Now, to kind of draw it together a bit, I want to take you to John chapter 5. Thanks, James. Yeah, there. It helps us with perspective. Okay, what is the kind of things he's going to bring? And we're going to talk about what is the fruit that he's talking about. What kinds of things. But in terms of the recreation work, the new creation work that Jesus is doing, I want you to think on the big cosmic level that there is an end of time coming, Jesus talks about, when he will resurrect created order and he will resurrect dead bodies from the ground. He really says that in the Gospels, and you should really believe that. If that feels foreign to you, you haven't read Jesus close enough. Jesus talks about lifting bodies, earthy bodies out of the ground and giving them resurrection life and a new creation, a new world that comes after this one. But he also talks about work that he's going to do now. And without getting into too much of the details, you might like to read John chapter 5 yourself this week. But in the middle of John chapter 5, he gives you these two perspectives of what he's going to do at the end, and but it's not just at the end and kind of wait around quietly until the end. No, he's going to do work now as well. So he talks about the end. He says in John chapter 5, very, very truly, I tell you, a time is coming and has now come. And then what he talks about is when I'll do resurrection. Jesus says in John chapter 5, I'm going to do resurrection. I'm going to do recreation now. The time's come now. But he also says 2-3 lines later, verse 28, he says, but I want to tell you there's a time coming in the future when I'll do resurrection. And it's just this beautiful little interplay in John chapter 5 in the middle there, where he says, I'm doing resurrection, and I'm doing the big kind of cosmic level of resurrection at the end, but I'm starting now. What I'm saying tonight is that Jesus has power for new creation work, to change what we hate about the world, but also to start with us, to change those things that are wrong with us, to change those things that are selfish, to change those things that are dead, to change those parts of our relationships and interactions in the world that have broken. He has power. And he tells you in John 15 how he engages us in that power, how he engages with us and we engage with him. John 15. Fine. I want to finish by telling you how this has hit me for 2 weeks now, because normally I prepare a sermon through the week and then I give it. But last week I prepared the sermon and then I didn't give it because I got the flu and I got a fever on Saturday night. So I got a second week to stick with it. I want to tell you how it's touched me this last 2 weeks. Firstly, there's one of my 3 beautiful children that we're just learning in the past 2 months. They're really struggling in that area. That's really challenging for them. And I think this is not a 3-year challenge. I think this is going to be a challenge for quite some years. And I've felt a bit kind of frustrated with myself about that. I've felt frustrated with them about that. I've felt frustrated with other people about that and just a bit depressed about it. And then I was stuck in John 15 for 2 weeks. That Jesus will, and he's so adamant, isn't he? He will bear fruit if you stay in him. And that gives me a hopefulness that not that my child will just kind of be a blazing star in every category of their life, but that Jesus will hold them and bear fruit through their life. Really special. Maybe related, but maybe not related. I've felt just a bit frustrated with myself in the past couple of weeks, just finding my limit several times. I don't know why. Just go through different seasons. This season, I'm finding lots of my edges and my limits. And I'm reminded from John chapter 15 that Jesus can bring newness where there's tiredness, brokenness, selfishness. I've noticed in the past couple of weeks that my friends really don't care about the stuff I care about Jesus. They don't get it. They love me and they accept me and they think it's kind of cute, but they don't really get it or care why it's happening. And I feel sad because Jesus says that without him you'll perish. I find that such a painful reality of my life, that Jesus says the people I love are perishing without him. But I'm reminded in John 15, Jesus says he can do new things. It's like saying to a grave digger, we're going to build, it's going to be really big what we're doing. You won't believe it's not just an extra row. It's not just a different type of shrub we're putting in this season. Build a train station here. And God can do that kind of work that is a complete new creation. That I'm not in control of, that I can't do. And then he did to me. I went from someone who didn't care to someone who I feel in love with Jesus now. And he can do that kind of work in the people I love too. As I stay, and here's the word I want to leave you with, abiding. As I stay abiding with Jesus. That's what he says. So there's the actual metaphor, vine, branches, fruit. What's the thing underneath the metaphor? Stay in me, abide. And I'll do new things. And I'll bring growth where I want to bring growth. So I want to encourage you, if you need that cosmic encouragement, what is going on in our world? You need encouragement for your own heart and the blockages and things that are hard this week. Jesus recreates what is old. Where do you see it? How is this not just an encouraging talk? It's because Jesus died on the cross. And there was a time when people just cried and hid. It was like a cemetery. It was a cemetery, grave. And then he was resurrected with new power, like he said he would be. And he brought a new thing, new life, resurrection life, no more to die anymore. And he changed the church. The church went from crying, mourning, hiding, to celebrating and going out and serving and bringing life wherever they go. I love that the church, for all the mistakes that we've made, and there's so many failures and deep, dark sins, we own those. And the church invented hospitals because we had Jesus working in us. And the church, a guy called George Miller, a German fellow living in England, invented orphanages because they used to just kind of pack kids away in part of the jail. Until he invented, because of Jesus working in, he invented the idea of orphanages. And countless Christians have done new things, big ones like that, inventing hospitals, that's a pretty good one, down to just laying down your life in love for your enemy, giving up at work for the goodness and humility when you couldn't put people down on road. Jesus is bringing all sorts of new things all the time if you'll abide in him.